Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have David Heatley, singer, songwriter, cartoonist, author, joining us for the second time. He's here to talk about his new album, If... available now on all streaming platforms. We talked to Dave about a year or so ago about his last record, and we dove more into his background and more of his written works. But in this one, we focus mostly on If and on what's coming next. So, before we get into that, we're going to listen to a track off If. This is Stop Wasting Love. The album's If... David Heatley. Stop Wasting Love. If... is the album. David Heatley. Available now on all streaming platforms. Talking with David is always a great conversation. His multiple means of expression via art, music, and writing lead to a really insightful conversation about how all these different mediums cross and where they long to touch. Like I said before, we talked with David about a year ago, so if you're looking for more of a historical background, check out our first part. Today, we're just focusing on If. So, if you guys can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on one of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests and sharing their insights with you. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Dave. So, to jump into it, this new record, If, what do you call it when you have a bunch of dots? Ellipses. If, ellipses.
Yeah, ellipses.
Is incredible. And I think it's like coming from your last record, it's like more emotionally like it's diving even deeper in an expanded upon way from the last record. And this was all recorded in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, in Arnaudville, which is like more Cajun country, a couple hours from New Orleans, and actually Brooklyn. I did all the vocals of Brooklyn.
Okay. So like were you working with Dave Bingham? Or not Dave Bingham. What's his first name? Bingham. Mark Bingham.
He was involved. I kind of produced the record myself this time around. But yeah, he was definitely a connecting point to a lot of the musicians. And, a really essential ingredient actually was a guy named, he goes by Dr. Jimbo Walsh down there. He actually did all the arranging for like the strings and the horns. And I think that's what made this record so special for me.
Was it definitely changed the sonic like scape. Like from the first track, If, I was like, this is like Herb Albert. Like the horns are so well done, and like it makes it makes that like that kind of dreamy joyousness of like the content of the tune, and like or not maybe the alluded to like it was like where. Because what I love about what you do is you hit all these different genres in different ways, and like it's just it funnels through just you, like, and I think I think listening through your discography and hearing like the kids record and like hearing like this like not that they're all but your last full length and like a serious focused bit it's interesting how all these different genres funnel through you in a way that doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like you're trying to do like reggae tune, not that you do reggae tune, but you know what I mean, like it doesn't seem like you're just marking it and hitting it. And that's what I think's so endearing about your work is it's just you, but you have all these different aspects of you that make sense, like, or as a listener is authentic.
It's beautiful to hear that. Thank you for saying all that. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
But like,
I think that's accurate. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, music for me, music's amazing because it's basically a way of like encoding emotion, and so it can be like re-experienced with someone else, like through the air. It's so ineffable. It's so amazing, and so yeah, the bedrock of each song is like, is it coming from a true emotional place in me, and the rest is sort of, what you then do with it, and that's why it's wonderful to work with other musicians with ideas and different producers because they can hear a direction for the song that you didn't necessarily hear. And but yeah, I don't write like in any one genre, and I used to think of that as like almost like a failing or like a limitation, like, oh, why can't I just dial it in and do one sound per record? But I just can't. These ideas have come to me and they're so disparate and they kind of need different approaches for each one. So that's just the way it is.
Well, what I think is interesting about that is like it's kind of like the archetype thing of in Carl Jung, right? Not only
Yeah.
it's like the shadow persona or whatever
Mm-hmm.
is you, and the kind of mask is the genre, and like we all
Mm,
experience the same emotions in all these different genres. Like just to pick on like reggae, Bob Marley has plenty of love songs, but so does Johnny Cash, and like
yes.
and if
Yes.
we like like it's almost I think more freeing to have like a lack there of commitment to genre. Like
Mm-hmm.
AC/DC can't put out a country tune like without everyone losing their mind.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but
Yes.
I bet they would love to.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you
Uh,
wind up alienating your fans. And the lucky thing about my music career is like I just haven't really had a lot of listeners, and I'm just very free to do whatever the hell I want, which is, again, it's got its frustrations, limitations. Like, of course, I'd love a huge following for my music, but I do feel completely liberated. Just there's just no one I'm answering to in a way but myself.
yeah. And that's cool because then it can be that full. Like I don't know if Herb Albert was the influence for that horn section, but I was like, I've never heard anyone use like a Herb Albert song aside from Herb Albert.
Yeah, well, I do love that. I love him, and I think Dionne Warwick and Bacharach was sort of the inspiration for some of the tunes
Okay, yeah,
specifically. Yeah, but that certainly that era is definitely being evoked.
yeah,
But,
definitely, definitely. Is that like? Did you grow up with that music,
um, hmm.
or was
I
it
mean, my
around?
parents, yeah, my parents really did not have clearly defined taste in music. It was weird. I kind of had to find everything on my own. I guess I would say. I mean, I really only got into Bacharach like a few years ago, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago when I was working on those Angel Numbers records. My guitarist and producer Pete Gallup and actually Dana Lynn, who's a incredible violinist and she plays in Broadway shows and stuff. She was also like a huge Bacharach head and big Dionne Warwick fan, and so they were kind of exposing me to stuff like that. And yeah, there's something about certain eras that like a certain emotion and a feeling is only possible to have been captured in that era, and you can definitely point to it and evoke it. But it is a nostalgic feeling, and yeah, they're kind of. It's funny how like certain stories and moods and emotions are more available to certain eras than others in a way.
Yeah,
There's very specific '70s like you know light FM sound that just like brings me back to childhood and like just works all over my emotions that you can't really fake it. You have to really channel it and not just try and stay on the surface of it.
I think that's really well said, and that's really interesting because there is a certain like tone to an era that I think is only available post. It's only available in
Mm,
nostalgia, or maybe it's only
mm-hmm.
available through the filter of nostalgia in a way. Because like
Mm-hmm.
that sound itself, like like it is kind of bubbly, but like it can mean so many different things coming from someone's personal experience. Is that kind of
Yes.
like was it supposed to be more of the joyous effect that you were going for?
I mean, this record really came out of. I mean, I like to say this is it's the whole record's kind of a self-portrait of me when I'm in the throes of what I call like impossible love. So just those crushes, those like unrequited love feelings, and the longing is really like all these songs came out of that place. And you know, it's taken me a long time to accept this about myself. I tend to just fall in love a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of muses out there for me, and I get crushes a lot. And instead of like pathologizing it or trying to cure myself of it, I sort of like decided to lean all the way into it and say, oh, what is there? What am I chasing? Who is this like mysterious female other that seems to keep reappearing in my life in various different people? And like, how is that really? It's like I said, it's a self-portrait. It's a dialogue between me and my internal idea of this ideal female other, whoever she happens to be embodied by at any given moment. When you really own that and dialogue with it, you're much more conscious of it. So, um, and it's freeing, and you're not ruled by it. I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm actually not ruled by these crushes. But this was an album to kind of explore it and purge it in a way, just like, have take control and say like, I'm actually going to control this narrative. I'm going to tell these stories from my point of view and not just be whipped around by these feelings.
Mm. That's, I mean, that's like going through because that kind of like the tune that stuck out to me like and really impacted me was "Stop Wasting Love," and like I think that's
Okay.
like exactly. I don't know if that's that after hearing what you said, like that makes so much sense what the song's about. Like,
Hmm.
but that's
Hmm.
because with
Yes.
those are complicated things, and like people are beautiful, and there's like so many amazing things that people have that maybe they don't even know they have that they offer by
Hmm.
just being there, right? And it's so
Yes.
hard, like the idea, like to I mean, limit oneself to only one monogamous type of thing, and like,
Hmm.
but when it's like inspiration and inspired, like the idea of crushes and like the idea of like being so impacted by someone's presence that it becomes
Yes.
a muse is like, and when you're open to that too, is so enriching. But I can see where it would lead to like a lot of walls and a lot of complications and a lot of um, strange or how unsure ways to handle different situations. But like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so
For
that's
sure. Hmm.
I was gonna say, so that's a really powerful like exercise and dedication that you did through this album then to like confront and address that thought process and those feelings
Mm.
because like that's
Yeah.
sorry.
It was. Well, I love that you're keying in on that song because in some ways that was as I was kind of moving through the grief of like never having this person and just like the longing and then I think I got to the song Beautiful Ending and it was kind of like, oh, I'm gonna try and make peace with just letting this go. And then Stop Wasting Love came to me as this sort of like exclamation point at the end, just like, you know what? This so much of this was a waste of time. Like, yeah, I got these great songs out of it, but like, I really drove myself a little bit crazy in the process. And like, there's people who want me that are available. Why am I running? Why am I running towards this person who isn't? What's the hook there? And how many of us do that? We just chase people who are unavailable. We drive ourselves crazy. They don't like it. They don't want it. Like, turn around and look. There's someone pining for you right now. Just give them a consideration. So yeah, there was like some anger in that song and like taking back my own power. Like I'm not going to be whipped around by this anymore. I'm gonna control this and like I don't know if control is the right word. I'm just going to be more present and like empowered in the face of my emotions rather than just controlled by them.
What do you think it is like that the unavailable is it that that person is unavailable that you think that kind of makes them more um enticing than someone who is? Is it that kind of like longing to keep like growing and being inspired and moving from that kind of makes
Mhm.
the one like want to chase that flame?
Yeah, it is it's so layered and interesting, right? I mean, I think there's always the deep kind of childhood longing for mother for as long as you can have her, and it's never going to be enough. There's always that like disconnection and like you need more and want more, and so it kind of taps back to that original, if you want to get like mythological or even biblical, like that sort of fall from grace, falling out of Eden. You just can never reclaim that moment of bliss when you're just like all your needs are met by this one person, this mother figure. So when you meet someone and fall in love with them, there's almost like a promise again of that return to that place of bliss and you're going to be everything to me. And then for me, it seems to be like I wouldn't be interested if there wasn't a flash of that, like if there wasn't like some warmth and some heat. But it's like what seems to have hooked me all these years was like the alternating between that and then coldness. And then it becomes that like, you know, um, the rat who's getting the reward schedule that's not regular, and then it drives them crazy because they don't know when to expect it, and you just get more and more hooked. And so yeah, because and again you keep getting these tantalizing bits like, oh well, maybe now they'll be warm again. Nope, they're cold. So um, yeah, and again there's a certain like uh, appeal to that drama for a while, especially like as an adolescent or something. But yeah, I don't have time for that anymore. I really want to be like loved by people who love me. It can be really consistent for me.
It's the homeostasis of comfort. Then
Yeah, and it's just I don't even know how to describe it. It's like real love instead of someone who toys with you and like pretends or plays with love. It's the difference between someone who's like, really committed and just like giving you love steadily. And you don't have to be performing for it. You don't have to be longing for it. You don't have to be like earning it even. It's just given to you. It's kind of a miraculous thing when you find that. And I'm lucky to have that right now. Yeah.
that's awesome. Was it and like that's I think that's well said, and like that's kind of the goal. Like I hope most people reach, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is in the context of the tune, it is fascinating how like you can be looking one direction and it's right next to you. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I guess like kind of in a writer's headspace or like someone who's taking bits of the world and like and looking at these bits and analyzing them and seeing the kind of magic that's there like even like an out of perspective love song or breakup song is like fascinating to kind of jump into these two characters and try to like imagine what this scenario would be like. And I know this if doesn't seem like that record. Like but you know, there's a lot I'm sure like Dylan would say there's like three tunes and like love and
Hmm.
breakups probably one of the themes, right? But like to kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
have that empathetic like thinking and that I think most writers and a lot of creators do and like even for like a sitcom or something to jump in like someone's first relationship. Like I'm guessing the person that wrote that is some exec that's probably hopefully married and doing well or whatever. But like to
Hmm.
kind of be able to dive into that space, like it makes sense like the idea of like the crushes and stuff like that would be like because you being open to like these type of like inspirations and type of like empathy for these narratives it makes sense that like it would lead to like confusion and like maybe missing the thing that's right in front of you.
Yes. Yes. That's really well said. Yeah. As you know, I'm also a cartoonist and a very influential person in my life back in my 20s was the cartoonist Chris Ware. And he had this great quote where he said, art for him is not communication, it's creating a place for the mind to go. And I think of these songs as like creating a box that I can open up and go be in when I'm feeling a certain mood. And it's almost like I want to have enough songs with enough different moods. So when I'm in that mood, I can play that song and feel better and feel comforted. And so, yeah, I'm not always in the mood that I'm evoking when I'm writing it, but it's almost like I know that I'm going to want to inhabit this at some time. And this is the one that's coming to me now. And I want to do it. Sometimes I'm definitely in that mood. When I wrote that song, I'm too sad to write this song.
Yeah,
I was just like miserably sad, like miserable, and just like feeling that hopeless. Like, how can you even write a song when you're this sad? It just feels completely daunting and pointless, even. And it really helped. It helped to write that, and then it's a great song to play when I'm in that space. And yeah, it is comforting. It's comforting to have your mind like instead of like pointing it outward and like longing for the world and longing especially for this person who's not available, like you can create you can create a space for you to soothe yourself and evoke or even those love feelings that I'm feeling so in love with her. I just want to instead of like sending her an email that's going to annoy her or call her or something, you just sing that song and it kind of like it scratches that itch a little bit. Like you can just kind of keep it contained.
it's creating that comfort that mother um archetype through a song as opposed to a person, I guess. That's a that's really cool. Like and with that tune in particular, Too Sad, like listening to that, like I read it and I'm like, "Oh man, this is going to but like this is going to be a bummer." But like
Hmm.
like that title, like without hearing cuz I like to listen to everything before reading about anything. Um and like I'm like, this is a really catchy tune. It's not like what I mean, it does have the sorrow in it, but I'm like, the melody and the piano is so nice, and
Mm,
it's almost that, it not sad, but it's a comfort. It's like it's not like what I thought it would be when I read it. It's way like it was. It's a very beautiful tune, and not in the sense that it's like uh sadness. You can relate to that. It's like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
comforting, and I mean, the sadness is there. I'm not saying that part was
sure.
missed. Like, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it is. There is a triumph that happens in the song, and I do feel like I pulled that off in writing it, which is just, you know, like to express how impossible it feels to write a song when you're sad. To actually write that song is a triumph. It's like, oh, I actually did
yeah.
communicate that feeling. So there is some kind of even joy in that. It's like art wins, you know.
Well, it's weird because sometimes you're like, you kind of you get in that space where, like, if I feel this way, and to get out of this, I'll do this. For in your case, I'll draw or write, and like sometimes maybe more than sometimes, when you attempt to do that when you're in that state, it doesn't pan out, and like, so when it does, you're like, oh my god, it worked. Like,
Yes, yes. Oh, it's so true.
because I find myself working with kids giving that advice a lot, and sometimes it doesn't pan out, and they're like, whatever. Like, so,
Totally.
but
Yeah,
when
it's a
it,
discipline. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
discipline.
and in that sense, it being a discipline is, I think, part of the stepping out of the way and letting that kind of longing to comfort come through, and finding that within the medium.
Hmm.
And kind of to build off that quote, is that kind of what Dancing Inside Out is reminiscent of?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly it's definitely a party song, and I think these songs I wrote pretty much all of them after spending time in New Orleans. I think every one of them actually, and Cajun country in Louisiana, and just being around these like really alive, exciting musicians who, I'm not someone who does music all day long. These people are. They literally will record in the studio with me and then have a gig that night and wake up the next morning and play some other thing and then a gig the next night. I mean, they just live their music, and it was just so inspiring to be around. So I think that song Dancing Inside Out is this like exuberant joy of like, yeah, I mean, like the lyrics say, this is the greatest night. Feeling love for your friends, feeling lust for your crush. Like it's the greatest rush. I mean, so yeah, it's celebrating that really heady experience of just being around people you love and you're out dancing or whatever, feeding off of all that energy.
What was it? Because like there's a line in there with I can't remember exactly, but our molecules coming out, like,
Yeah, feel the beat when you breathe, feel your blood, feel your enzymes.
yeah, yeah. I was like, but that's what one thing I love about what you do is, like, in all your projects, there's kind of like, maybe not the Angel ones, but in like all the other projects, there's a tune kind of like this in a different way, like, and like I
Mhm.
love that you're able to go there and fully
Yeah.
commit to this bit, and like it fits with everything, like,
Well,
um
that's so good to hear that it fits because I can't tell. I'm just like I do love this record. I love each song on it, and when I listen to it, I'm like listening to all the other musicians too. I'm kind of marveling, like, oh my god, look where these people took this song that I wrote. But yeah, I can't. It feels like an album to me, but I'm glad to hear it. It hangs together for you too.
like living in New Orleans for a bit, how long were you there? How long did you just spend recording? Was this months or weeks?
Oh no, I was just down there doing basic checks for a week, and
Oh,
then
okay.
and then like Jimbo would write these parts in between, and we would record them with different musicians. Like I wasn't even there for some of these sessions, for most of the sessions. Like if there was overdub horns or something, I would just get the rough mix afterwards and stuff.
Okay. But while you were there, you got the experience, like, New Orleans.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, not as much as I would like. I definitely want to go back and spend more time, but enough to just feel it in my blood, and just take it in and be inspired by it for sure.
Because
Yeah.
it's just interesting because like I've only been to New Orleans once, and I was on tour with a band as part of the nonprofit, and like
Mm-hmm.
hung out at a women's shelter, and we painted and fixed up this back porch, and then went to the gig, and then
That's cool.
hung out late at the I can't remember those desserts, those pastries that I can't.
Beignets or
Yes,
something.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, and like kind of just being there and being like, wow, this is so cool. Like, and it's interesting because music is so part of culture, and like
Mm-hmm.
when you go somewhere where it's kind of celebrated slightly different, like how you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about it being so alive, and like these musicians just doing it always and wandering everywhere, like to be moved by that, even if it's briefly, is so impactful.
It really is. I mean, there's nothing like seeing a place from the point of the view of the people who actually live there. So like, going to my friend's gig and then her taking me to like a dive bar and staying there till 3 a.m. and playing the jukebox and these like local Louisiana people with their like, hunting pants come in. And I was just like, wow, I am down south right now. I am not on the East Coast. I'm not in New York City. This is fucking awesome. It was really, yeah, it was really eye-opening and fun and so specific to the place. And I'll always just have those memories to draw from.
Did you go? Were you bopping around with Lily Lewis?
Not as much her. I mean, she was like hanging in the studio, and we've hung out in New York a little bit. I've seen her play here, but no, it was like Tiff Lamson and Julie Odell and Sarah Quintana. Those were kind of my three friends who took me around. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome, because I've talked with Lily, and she's very, very talented and an amazing singer songwriter, and
Hmm.
was also on your last
I love
record, right?
her. Yeah, yeah. No, she's a powerhouse. She's amazing. Yeah, I feel so like beyond lucky that these people would play on my record. It's ridiculous.
Because
It's great.
Lily did a clean living, the last track.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, she sings on a few different ones, but yeah, she's the kind of most highlighted on that one, I would say. Yeah.
okay, okay. Well, I feel like with the instrumentation through all this, like everyone's everywhere, like.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But I guess the reason I wanted to ask about like kind of being in New Orleans and being around that culture is like on It's Midnight, it's like
Hmm.
it goes French like for a second, and I'm like, that's a very like kind of New Orleans thing to experience. So
Yeah.
clearly the culture was impact there. Was that the intention, or is that just kind of being there and being like this would be cool?
Yeah, it was an intuitive thought. I mean, that song I wrote, yeah, I wrote it about how even when you know someone for a long time, there's this like wonderful opportunity to like reintroduce romance and carve out some space for just you two and reawaken to like new dreams that you could have together. And I knew right away I wanted Sarah Quintana to do all like the backing vocals. And I had in my head, I was like, because the chorus is like enjoy a midnight rendezvous. I was like, oh well, that's a French word. Wouldn't it be cool if like there was a little section where she's just talking in French and she's just like, we're singing oohs and she's just going like kind of cooing in your ear, saying this like sexy French stuff. And then it was her idea to just like, well, why don't I just like sing that chorus in French? I was like, that's even better. I love it. So she just sort of, yeah, it was a collaboration. She kind of like, she had a friend in France. She called while she in the studio, like translating over the phone together and working up the. It was just great. It was really perfect. But she really brought herself into that because she has. I mean, I love her music so much, and she has so many wonderful songs in French, and so like anyone on my record, I really want to like have their essence kind of in the track and not like direct it too much, but really have them be free to play and occupy some space in the track too. So that's what she did.
Oh, I definitely think it's there because like it sticks out, and like, but just like I was saying, it oddly blends in, or not oddly, or perfectly blends in with the whole like
Mhm.
what is you of the record.
Mhm.
Because like coming in with like a horn section like that, this doesn't seem too, this seems perfect. Um,
Mhm.
but that's that's really cool.
I love that. Yeah.
Another, I guess, The Mexican rapper that was on Dancing Inside Out.
Emma
Um,
Ramos. Yeah.
yeah. Was that kind of the same process? Was just happened to be there, or was that something that like this would be sick? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to give credit to Mark for that idea. He was like, I mean, well, we just emailed a while back when we were talking about the songs and stuff, and he often will just throw out like random ideas, and like half of them don't pan out. They're just things but he was like, what about flipping it on its head and having a Mexican, having someone rapping in Spanish on Dancing Inside? And I was just like, I never would have thought of that. And then he apparently had a friend who like knew Emma and was like, he sent me a music video of hers, and I was like, she's absolutely perfect. Oh, and then by the way, she lives in New York. I was like, what? This is crazy. And then like I emailed her and she was totally down and was really honored and loved the track. And then so she and I just had like a very fun few hours in the studio. Just we met first and kind of like talked through some of the Spanish she could write for it, and we were like finding phrases and things. I don't really speak Spanish, so she was having to tell me like, oh, this would be a funny joke, and this could be a double entendre, that kind of thing, and I loved it. And then in the studio, we a bunch of that was even improvised, and I kind of comped together like the best little bits. But her energy on that track is just out of this world. I mean, I love what she did for the track. I think she's like an essential ingredient for that song.
definitely brings life to it. And that's why I was like listening through it. I'm like, I don't even like because I don't speak French or Spanish either, and like
Hmm.
know very few words in both languages.
Hmm.
So I'm like, how's Dave writing all this? Like, you know what I mean? Like as a songwriter and as someone who records stuff as well, I'm like trying to piece it together.
Mm,
Like even just the
yeah.
kind of like direct and like I don't know. So that it came off really really well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it does. Like when New Orleans is your muse, which it was for this record, or all of Louisiana. I mean, it is very, very diverse in terms of musical influence. It is the gumbo, stew where everything gets thrown in. So there is plenty of Latin influence down there. So yeah, it's like if I'm gonna take the logical extreme of like every song could have different genre influences, like why don't we now expand it to languages too? Why does it all have to be in English? It just sort of intuitively went there, and it felt right.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's like interesting with the idea of language and music, like how similar and how define it, how a language can define the type of music, right? Like
Hmm.
just because of
Hmm.
the verbal phrasing within the language changes the
Yeah.
timing of like the structure of the music. I was talking
Oh
with
yeah.
these Greek musicians a few
Hmm.
weeks ago, and one of them played. They played bouzouki, or one of them played bouzouki. His name's Doc
Hmm.
Bouzouki, and he's good at it. He rips, and bouzouki is like
Nice.
a bigger mandolin, and it's
Mm.
tuned like a mandolin, and it's
Okay.
double strung like it, right? But there's all
Nice.
these different like approaches with modes, and it's all in nine, and like um,
Mm.
when I was talking with him,
Mm.
he was like, "Oh yeah, I love doing this, and I also play in a bunch of bluegrass bands." And I'm like, "How do you, how do you adjust all that thinking, all that musicality to like a bluegrass band?" And his response was, "I follow the vocal phrases. If someone's singing, he kept
Mm.
going on the road again, which I don't really find it to be a
Mm.
bluegrass tune, but it
Mm.
is sure. Like he was singing it. He's like on the road again. So then I'll play on the road again, and I'm like, so it becomes more of a verbal phrasing. Like so some of our
That's
like
fascinating.
right. Um,
Yeah. I love that because it does come from the same impulse. I mean, language, there's tones in the tone of voice we have. We have like upswings in certain words and phrases. And yeah, we're just pushing air through our lungs and rhythmically, saying these sentences. It's true. It is. And the fact that it would be different per country or per language. Yeah, of course that would. It makes total sense that would influence the music, but I never really connected that. It's really smart.
it's I kind of dive into this music language idea a lot, and like that his
Yeah.
example made it so clear in a way. I was like, that's awesome. Like,
Yeah,
so it
that
makes
is awesome.
sense like diving into like these different like this culture that is influenced by all these different the gumbo, right? All these other
Hmm.
cultures and like but when you mix all this together, it's that. And it's
Yes.
really cool to see it come through in different spots in you on this record. You know what I mean? Like from listening to the
Yeah.
last record. Um,
Well, I definitely have a very manic mode I can flip into, and like Dancing Inside Out is the manic track on that record, and it's like so the idea of having Emma like rapping in like rapid fire Spanish, just like really exuberant, celebratory kind of, these like channeling these Spanish speaking DJs or something in Mexico that she grew up hearing, like "Dígalo cantando." It's so perfect, Of course, we had to go there, yeah.
yeah, but that's energetic. You can't like whatever is being, you feel that energy. You're like, whoa, yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah, and she's basing it off the track too. I mean, so we did have a propulsive kind of probably Latin infused beat going, and it just made sense for her to kind of add that icing over it. But yeah, they definitely inform each other.
because another thing, like working with Mark, like I talked with Mark a few months ago about his records he put out because I'm
Hmm.
sure the two are the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure this guy's got endless stuff because that guy's like, oh
He has a new record coming out that's like unbelievable. It's
yeah,
so good. Yeah, I think it's called is it Kafka and Bakersfield or something like that.
okay,
Anyway, yeah, it's like
sweet.
I don't know, really, and like a lot of the same musicians he's connected me to playing on his thing, and wildly different genres, kind of like similar. Um, what were you saying about him now?
Oh, anyway, like I was gonna like, but yeah, like well, working with him, like and just talking with him, it was kind of like all over and like really that's like so working with him. I imagine like there's a lot of like how a lot of like who knows what because his genres and like just his songs like are structured in such a way I'm like where am I now, like you really have to like follow this mode and like it gets you to the
Hmm.
point and they're so well written in that way. But when he's looking at a project like yours, is he kind of suggesting like things like that, or is it more of like let's try someone rapping in Spanish? Is it more flavors, or is it more of a structure direction from Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I could say more about like the last record we did together because he was less involved producing this one, but
Okay.
it definitely is that. I mean, he for the first record we did together, he like handpicked every musician on it, and sometimes would even like write parts for them. Like he was very very involved in that record, and there was some of that this time too. But I did kind of take the reins a bit more. But like yes, I took the reins, but he had introduced me to all those people, so I didn't even know they existed before Mark. So I definitely like I owe him a ton. And yeah, his ideas. He's just worked for 50 years or something. He knows, so he knows every kind of genre. He knows every kind of player. He's got an insane Rolodex. Like yeah, it's an amazing resource.
So through kind of seeing him do that on the first one, or the last record, I should say, kind of like made clear what to do on this one
Yeah, I
or
think of
how
it
to.
like mhm. I think of it as like being a painter and someone exposes you to like, oh, here's 100 new colors you could use instead of the like five you've been using or something. It was a bit like that. And then I watched, watched him like mix the colors or something and do some of the painting himself. And then I was like, okay, I get somehow how to do this. And then, I just know my own limitations. So it's like, I'm not going to score a horn section. I'm going to hand it to Jimbo Walsh, who's like brilliant at it. And of course he's going to, like, I'll give him feedback, but like, I trust his ideas, so he comes up with something like way better than I could have. I'll have a demo and there's like some vague, melody I'm singing or something, and he may follow a bit of that, but like a lot of it, like I said, making room for people's own ideas to take the song someplace I couldn't have taken them.
That's it's interesting because like with that like there's so much we're limited to as people and like I mean we can only like know one mode of a thing, not really know one mode, but it becomes really hard to know multiple modes of like one form of expression. So like to be like I'm gonna
Hmm.
score a violin a string quartet and like But I also
Yeah.
find, so I always, I mean, I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do is put that trust on someone else and see what they come back with, because it's going to be something
Yeah.
you would have like never attempted to like piece together or grinded your skull just to get a mediocre version, you know?
Yes.
And
No, exactly.
the other medium I notice that does that a lot is like comics, as far as like
Hmm.
having like someone do the backgrounds and the lettering, and like it becomes one giant like thing that you don't really think is like multiple people, but is. Um,
Hmm.
Now, as a cartoonist, um, do you work in other modes like that as well? Do you have like a guy who does lettering and stuff for your books?
No, no,
Okay.
I did everything myself on those books. But I relate to what you're describing because I'm like an animation director, and my one of the big things I'm working on for a couple of years is trying to adapt my last book to a TV series, which would be
Yeah.
like very collaborative. I mean, that would be like me maybe setting character sheets and like some indications of backgrounds. But yeah, other people would be painting the backgrounds. Other people would be doing all the actual animation. Yeah, I'd be directing more than drawing. So like, yeah, comics are my space to be like a total OCD nut job, like just doing every job myself and labor intensive and kind of crazy making, honestly. I kind of need a break from it now. But yeah, I'm way into animation and the same kind of thing, like putting like you just hire really well. You get someone you 100% trust and hand it to them and be like, yeah, what would you do? And give enough direction to not make them feel like lost in the woods about it, but yeah, really see what they come back with, and it's so thrilling. And then when you're watching it, you're not just like with my own stuff. I see all the flaws right away after it's done, and I get sick of it. I could never like live with my own art on the walls. But with someone else, like if someone else does a music video for me that I've directed, I could watch it over and over again because I'm watching this person's like brilliance. It's really fun.
um, I'm trying to remember the tune. The music video was like a ghost version of you helping the girl across all these things. Was that,
Yeah, on your side, on
yeah,
your
on your
side.
side?
Yeah.
Um, was that something that you kind of directed or gave?
Hmm.
Okay, that, because that's a really
Yeah,
cool. I really enjoyed that. Like that came out
I,
really
I
well.
I love making that video. Yeah, the illustrator for that is a woman named Olga Stonda, actually from Ukraine. Um, and she actually co-directed it with me even. So I might have a certain idea. I definitely had the idea of like the ghost boy and the girl and in the swamps of Louisiana, and I said all kinds of reference of the kinds of trees I wanted and all that. And I definitely had like, point beats that we were going to hit throughout the story. But I mean, so much of it was her own ideas, like these really beautiful little moments. And then I hired this guy, Hadi Tabasi, who's in Turkey, and he animated it. So then, like, he took her flat illustrations, which are gorgeous, but then he added all this like delightful movement that neither of us, you know, necessarily expected. And things like when the boy's like running along the log chasing after her, and then he becomes a little ghost, a wispy ghost, and kind of like sails past her to be in front of her. That was all him. Like we didn't even have that in the storyboard. So yeah, it's just great. It's great trusting people and seeing what comes back.
Because like animation is so hard, and like um it's so much more work. It's just like trying to pick apart a string ensemble. Like there's so many
Hmm.
minute things that if you're a songwriter, you're like, I worried about the phrase I need to do and the chord progression I had. Like
Yes. Yes.
but it that came out beautiful, and I'm excited to see if are you working with that same type of crew for your book?
Well, the TV series, we're like getting close to pitching it to streamers now. So there's no guarantee anyone's going to buy it, but I do feel really good about the pitch. And it's like there's this company, Shadow Machine. They're an LA animation studio. They actually did the Del Toro Pinocchio
Oh,
movie
okay.
recently,
Yeah.
and they did like BoJack Horseman and Tuca and Birdie. They've done those shows, so they're an amazing studio, and they're kind of like on board now pitching with us. So we I think we have a better shot than average to like get some attention, at least get a pilot deal or something. And my co-writer on that is just a much more seasoned like TV person. So there's a lot of me like handing over the reins and trusting and yeah, like I feel like one person in the mix rather than like the lead on this, which is great. It's really freeing actually. It's not all on me. It's like we're sharing the burden, you know.
Yeah, well, because that makes those emails that maybe don't matter as much matter super much, and you're like, oh, I'm overthinking everything because it's on me. Like that's that's awesome that you have a team and someone who can help do or even just communicate right. You know, maybe
Yeah.
animators are looking for keywords that you didn't know they care about. Like,
Yes.
I'm sure you
Yes.
do,
You
but
got
you know, what I mean, like,
no. You
um,
got to learn their language to be able to communicate for sure. Yeah.
um, because we talked about your last book in our last chat, and like, it's such a beautiful like concept, and I think as an animated feature, it reach more of a wider audience and bring them to that. So I'm excited that you're doing that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Fingers crossed. I really hope it happens. Yeah. It'd be great to have the TV series. It's very fictionalized. It's not, but it is the same kind of like the guy addicted to 12-step programs and like his sort of crazy marriage, and you know, it is based enough on my life that it should be funnier and more fictional, hopefully.
Was it now like kind of rewriting that in a way to hit those beats? Was that working with another person, or did you kind of like take that lead on your own?
No, I would say, I mean, I'm working with this guy named Adam Resnick, who he's like an early Letterman writer, and
Okay,
he did in the 90s or maybe late 80s, he did this show on Fox called Get a Life with Chris Elliott. I just grew up like loving this show, so I was a big fan of his before we even met, and so I would say he's definitely the more seasoned like lead writer. He's come up with a lot of the structure and a lot of the scenarios. I mean, we brainstormed all the characters together and like, um, yeah. I mean, I'm in there working with him, but he's definitely like kind of more the head writer, I would say. For the
gotcha.
pitch.
Did working with him like kind of influence if in any way?
Uh, it's a good question. I would say it was like really because he really likes my music, which was nice. It was surprising. I would send him demos when I was working on the last record, and then when I sent him the final record for Life Our Own Way, he really loved it. So I think just in that it was a boost of confidence and he's a discerning guy. Like he worked in a record store when he was younger, and he has really interesting, weird taste in music. So it was very validating, I'd say. I don't know if he's got such a different sensibility from me as a writer. Like I feel like my writing style of songwriting is so different from he's a comedy TV writer. But yeah, I mean I'm sure there's like you never quite know how someone's influencing you, you know.
That's
It's
true.
definitely possible.
That's true. Because I just even I know it's a comedy write up, but at least the structure of like idea, thought, interesting thought, blah 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 blah, payoff, instead of
Mhm.
joke. You know, maybe that
Mhm.
equates somehow to like emotion, or descriptor, emotion. You know, I'm not a
Yeah.
um, I'm not a comedy writer, so I don't know the beats like per se, but
Right.
I just that's fascinating. I love reading about writing, which is a weird sentence. like
No,
like
I know what you mean though. I do too. Yeah.
and like it's kind of like in I guess in for myself reading about writing or reading about different ways to kind of come to these ideas is kind of like it's kind of like learning a new chord progression, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
matter what chord it is, you know it's a 1 4 5. And like what's that
Mhm.
what door does that open? All of
Mhm.
rock and roll, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's
Yeah. Yeah.
um
No, it's true. These tools matter, and they do influence what songs you write because then you have different things to pick up as you're trying to express certain emotions. Yeah, I mean, I would say he's definitely a master at like really stripping things down to the bone and like what's really needed in this sentence, and let's get rid of everything else that isn't funny. Like there's a ruthlessness which I think is great, And I definitely had that on this record in terms of like there was like 3 songs that I was very attached to that like I was like these just don't fit on the record, so we're not using them. So that kind of ruthlessness I think
Yeah,
maybe affected me. Yeah.
that's awesome. And like, um, and also to get like the approval of a record store guy.
Yes, yes.
Like,
The snooty record store guy.
yeah, that this, like there's certain people that they're gonna show you something always that you've never heard of, and that's why you go to them. You go to them for that thing you don't know.
Yes, yes,
And then you're like, yeah, have you heard of Jimi Hendrix? And they're like, whatever, nerd.
totally. You're so
But
basic, man.
I know, so basic, Jimi Hendrix. Like, John, let me guess, you like John Coltrane too? Okay.
Right. Well, this is the guy that influenced him from 1930 and blah blah. Yeah, I know.
On this one song that's on this B side that you don't have, like you're like, but at the same time that we're kind of put in our place with those guys, it's inspirational to like know that there's always more to find. And like,
oh yeah, it's infinite.
Yeah,
It's a lifelong pursuit, worthy of your entire life to study music for sure.
definitely. And I love seeing with you how it crosses different platforms and different mediums, and how like you can jump into being a cartoonist, making comics, making TV shows, and doing designs for like for magazines and ads, and make music. And like it's a beautiful through line that like is super inspiring to show that everyone has multiple means of expression, and like they can all influence each other. I don't know why I stumbled on that word, but that's why I'm always excited to talk with you, Dave. And I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Yeah, man, me too. This was great.
With as far as music's concerned, I know this record's coming out. Are you diving into something else as well? Is there more in the works musically?
Yeah, I actually have I got like almost another whole record written.
Yeah.
It's very different. It's much more. You kept mentioning the word archetypal, which is very big for me right now. I'm a student of Jung myself, and I've been doing Jungian therapy for about 10 years now, and so I would say these songs came from a very deep, almost like ancient place in me, and I feel like they're a little more like timeless folk songs than I've written before. I'm really excited about them. They're dealing more with kind of archetypal, almost mythical characters rather than my personal life. They're still very emotion heavy and like emotionally driven, but yeah, they're kind of story songs in a real, early ancient storytelling mode that I've never done before. I'm excited.
That's in a weird I guess maybe planned or unplanned way, like if's kind of more like your personal, like dealing with some of these like longing for the mother archetype, like I guess going to the cultural or the unconscious or the conscious archetype, right? That's the one everyone has, the conscious archetypes, like the folk heroes and like those type of like things that we see through everything.
I would say archetypes live in the unconscious, but they, you have a relationship to them. So your conscious mind, you strive to, like, again, not be ruled by them, but to dialogue with them. So yeah,
Right.
sometimes you do embody that hero who needs to go out and, be ruthless and be a killer or something. Sometimes you've got a much softer, like, I don't know, like the image that's coming to me is like a fairy with like a light touch in the woods doing magic or something. There's a trickster side of you. We all have these different characters. So yeah, I think it's like, allowing them to talk to you, listening to them, and then channeling them into a story or into a song. It's just incredibly powerful. And I think I'm just hopeful, like, even more people could relate to these new songs I'm writing now. They just feel, they came to me in this like really easy, peaceful sort of way.
That's
I'm
exciting.
curious.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm curious
Cool.
as well. That's what I should say. If I guess for one last question, kind of on the whole like Jungian, um, if this was like the hero's journey, where do you think "If" as a record would fall?
it in some ways it's kind of like a dark night of the soul. It's sort of
Okay.
like who am I in relation to the beloved, you could say, like who am I specifically? Um, and I think as you know yourself more and more specifically, and you go deeper into your specific life, then I think you can pass over to a more I guess some people say like objective instead of subjective. So like the objective truths that everyone can share, the universal things, the universal stories. So I would say maybe it's a progression towards that. It's like really dialing into me and my interior life, my specific emotions, and then hopefully journeying past that to something even deeper.
Beautiful. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited. I'm hoping for this TV show, The Pan Through, and I'm excited for this next record, my friend. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, Dave. This is a real soulful conversation. Thank you.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.